welcome back to Just One Question. I never thought when I started this series almost a year ago that we would still be here, 2021, recording it, but I can't imagine a better person to kick off the new year with than Christina Blacken. So I'm really thrilled that Christina is agreeing to be on the show with me. She is the founder, and this part I love, Chief Narrative Strategist. I don't know why I never thought of that and didn't call myself a Chief Narrative Strategist. That's just really cool. Of TheNewQuo, which is a leadership and inclusion consultancy, and that is www.TheNewQuo.com if you want to go and check it out. Christina is a podcast and a speaker, and that's how I originally met her, through a group of speakers. And she was a lot of fun to meet. And so I thought, let's get her back, or let's get her on this show. So welcome, Christina. Tell us how you're doing. You're in New York. What's your pandemic been like? How are you doing?
My pandemic has been very slow, very reflective. I didn't realize how in motion and in action I was, which makes sense. New York City is the city of action and discomfort. So being able to just relax and slowly move through things has been very interesting for me. And also I had a lot of time in the park. I was saying this before we started recording, that I've spent more times in the park this year than I have in 5 years. And everyone was doing everything in the park as it was the most safe place to be. Bar mitzvahs, weddings, birthdays. It's a Wednesday. So that was a really interesting part of my kind of reconnecting in these very kind of picnicky, old school, very like no restaurants, no flash sort of ways, which has been wonderful. And also, my business and work grew exponentially because I focus on, inclusion and equity. Right. And I was actually really surprised by that because so many people's businesses closed in 2020. So I am very grateful that mine was the opposite of just this consciousness and this evolution of people's ideas around certain concepts, wanting them to work with me essentially because of that.
That's great. And we can only celebrate when the pandemic does a good turn as well as all the terrible turns. It's done so much of humanity. So that's great. Thanks for that. And the just one question then, let's get right to it. When all this is said and done, we're going to be changed in some way. And I'm just really curious now to ask wise people like you, how do you think we're going to be changed? And don't worry, I won't hold you to it. We won't come back in a year and say, we didn't get changed that way. But I'm just really curious, how are you feeling now that we might be changed by this?
Well, the first thing I've noticed, which is related to the work that I do, is consciousness. I think we have a higher level of consciousness than we ever had before in terms of our relationships, our connections to our communities, the ways that we show up at work and why we're even doing certain work, the systems that are clearly broken and crusty and need to go and are failing millions of people daily. And I think those always existed. Those were always truths, but it's kind of like people have been able to wipe the mirror that was really foggy and see themselves clearly for the first time. And I think there's a silver lining in that. It can be a very painful process of being self-reflective and being able to have this sort of level of consciousness open. But the great thing about it is we can clear away the muck and the things that aren't working, and it allows people to move to their fullest potential, to close that gap between who they are and who they want to be. So for me, I think it is a good thing. It is a painful thing. It's like working out. When you work out, it's kind of painful. Then afterwards, the endorphins come in and you're like, whoo, like that was an amazing Peloton spin bike workout. I loved it. And your muscles are growing because of it. So it's sort of this pain, this growing pain phase is sort of bottoming out before the wave picks back up, essentially. And I think it's touching every single aspect of our lives because of it.
That's fascinating. I love that answer. And I love the idea that our consciousness is being raised, because that would feel like then it wasn't just all sickness and death. So thank you so much for that. Thank you, Christina Blacken, for being on Just One Question and for killing the answer. I love it. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course.